Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Climate Service Providers Academy, day 4. I'm gonna, we do have a good amount of folks today, and we'll just give it we can just get started, actually, since we are a little over the hour. But again, welcome. Today is day 4, and today is the California and Nevada region. So really excited to be joined by CNAP, Ariel from CNAP, and Grace from Eagle Rock Analytics, who are going to be walking us through data and climate tools from the California and Nevada region. So here is today's agenda. So obviously, welcome back. We're so excited to be here today and to get the session started. We're going to start off with some breakout rooms so you get to know the folks that are in the session today and connect more with your fellow Academy peers. We're going to get an overview of CNAP and Eagle Rock Analytics. You heard a little bit about them in the opening session, but you're going to get a deeper dive into what they do, what kind of tools they work with, what services they provide. We're going to have a 10-minute break since our session is 2 hours today. And then after we come back from break, we're going to be joined by 2 case study presenters, Justin Chambers and Adam Landis from the Western Regional Climate Center, who is going to show climate services and tools in action. After that, you'll have a chance to ask any questions you want to them, and then we're going to have a peer learning discussion reflecting on all that we've learned so far and how this can actually apply to your work specifically. And then in the end, we're going to wrap up, finish any last questions or comments, and look forward to our next session, which is going to be next week. So like I said, our first activity is going to be a breakout room activity. So we are going to move into smaller groups where you'll get a chance to introduce yourselves. These are going to be about 8 minutes, and Megan is creating the groups right now to have about 3 people in each. So you can share your name, pronouns, location, land acknowledgement, anything you feel comfortable sharing, what organization you're coming from, what is your work, what is your role, what kind of work do you do, and then any past experience you have with regional climate services. Hi, welcome back. We have about 5 more seconds until all of the rooms are back. All right. I see folks are coming back in. I hope you enjoyed meeting your fellow Academy participants, and that you met someone new maybe. But I am excited to introduce our session leads for today. We have Ariel from CNAP, like I mentioned, and we have Grace from Eagle Rock Analytics. So first, I'm going to introduce Grace, who is going to give an overview of the California-Nevada Adaptation Program. So Ariel is the lead for the Southern Nevada Heat Resilience Lab, and she's the project coordinator for the California-Nevada Adaptations Program. She has a master's degree in urban sustainability from AULA. She focuses on heat impacts, community engagement, and heat adaptation. So I'm excited to pass it to Ariel to tell us more.
Hey, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here with you all today. I'm going to walk you through CNAP, which is the California-Nevada Adaptation Program. Our mission is to improve resilience in California and Nevada by providing decision makers usable climate information through integrating cutting-edge physical and social sciences. So we have a multidisciplinary team that focuses on the region's acute climate impacts, which are extreme heat, wildfire smoke, coastal flooding, water scarcity, and mental health. So we have 6 core research projects that work with community partners to leverage local knowledge to promote equitable adaptation approaches. We have 3 key pathways. that are listed here on this slide. And those, so these are 3 key pathways for building climate resilience. And those are supported by the 5 core values, which are pictured here on the slide. So for convening and connecting, we're bringing together researchers, practitioners, community partners, community members to determine good practices and how to scale across our region and across the CAP-RISA network. We aim to co-produce research. So that is conducting research that will inform planning and decision-making to increase capacity across our region, and catalyzing solutions that will lead to adaptation pathways that work on the ground now and for the future. So for this current award period, CNAP has moved away from the creation of data sets and tools, and we've moved into community engagement around what data and tools have told us in the past about the regional climate impacts and needs of our communities. So our work now centers on the impacts the data show and engagement with frontline communities to co-create solutions for climate resilience. Next slide, please. Great, so my project is the Southern Nevada Heat Resilience Lab, which is SNARL for short, and I don't know who came up with that, but it always kind of makes me laugh. So the goal of this project is to grow the capacity for Southern Nevada to increase heat resilience in communities by implementing effective and just adaptation. So I'm bringing together local agencies, community organizations, and I'm connecting them with researchers who can assist in designing potential solutions. Co-creation of solutions is very centered in my work, and I'm in the process of building trusting relationships with community members, our frontline community members most impacted by heat, and the community-based organizations that represent them, so that we have an accurate understanding of what our communities need most to adapt to heat. Next slide, please. So our next project is hold on, my screen is being really goofy. Building water resilience through climate information and workforce development in the San Joaquin Valley in California. So this addresses the variability of California's water supply and the changing water policy landscape. And this is one of the nation's most agriculturally productive regions. So this project centers local technical and educational staff from the Kern County Community College District and the Central Motherlode Regional Consortium of Community Colleges in creating a local knowledge to action pathway for water resource use, management, and adaptation. This project has had a lot of success with curriculum development and student feedback, and is working on a series of TikTok videos to dispel myths around water in California. So I really look forward to seeing that. Next slide, please. Supporting household health adaptation to compound events of extreme heat and wildfire smoke. So this is another heat related project. This one is centered in Reno. So I'm in Las Vegas. This project is in Reno. And folks there, when it's wildfire season and you have active wildfires, heat and wildfires tend to go hand in hand. But a lot of folks in the more northern areas, they don't have traditional AC like we do down here. They may have swamp coolers, which requires opening windows, or they may have no cooling at all. And so these folks face trade-offs between cooling their spaces adequately and wildfire smoke exposure. And so this project will increase the opportunities for achieving kind of optimal equitable, holistic household health outcomes in Northern Nevada and California. So related to kind of those trade-offs and the compound events of extreme heat and wildfire smoke. Next slide, please. Our project, Evaluating Nature-Based Solutions for Coastal Adaptation in Southern California, explores how nature-based solutions and dynamic adaptation pathway planning can reduce coastal flooding and erosion that's threatening some of the West Coast's most heavily accessed beaches. This project centers marginalized Indigenous communities to help maintain their connection to these coastal places and resources, and open dialogues about coastal resources and stewardship that centers Indigenous knowledge. So this project also will demonstrate how interdisciplinary knowledge can better support coastal communities to start making investments in adaptive actions. Next slide. The Adaptive Mind is a project that will not start until 2024, which feels like it's just around the corner, and it basically is. But this project addresses the increasing mental health challenges associated with climate change. That's including from traumatic climate-related disasters, as well as the kind of pervasive impacts of a changing climate and the existential threat of climate change. So this project will focus on people exposed to climate impacts, but also practitioners who have to kind of engage with this and engage with that type of trauma on a daily basis. Next slide. Thank you. So this is our Small Grants project, which is building capacity through reciprocity with tribal communities. So we, through the Climate Science Alliance's Tribal Working Group, this supports Indigenous involvement in CNAP activities by identifying tribal research priorities and centering the co-production of that research through fellowship, compensation for Indigenous science consultants, and funding for tribal-led projects. This brings together researchers and partners to engage frontline and historically excluded communities to address community-identified local adaptation challenges and solutions. And all these projects recognize the critical importance of incorporating local and traditional knowledge in the project processes, outputs, and outcomes. And then I think, yeah, my last slide, please. So we do have some regional challenges. Firstly, I think the one I'd like to point out is my last bullet point, but it's the disparities between California and Nevada. So California is fairly well-resourced, especially compared to Nevada, when it comes to action on climate change. They've been at the forefront as a state for quite a while, and have more of a network and an ecosystem around climate work. And Nevada lags behind in that aspect. So that's definitely a challenge working in both Nevada and California and trying to scale projects that work best for each region. One of our other challenges is letting data live and inform our projects. So as I mentioned, we've kind of moved out of the climate services and tools space and more into that building climate reliance space. So what we're trying to do is understand the social life of climate data. And we've let that inform our understanding of frontline communities, and we share that data with frontline communities, and the data that we produce through this next award period will be co-produced with our frontline communities and shared equally. We've also used climate data in the past and tools to identify our frontline communities. So working with, like, for example, in my project, there is a wonderful study done on urban heat vulnerability that helped us focus in on the neighborhoods that have the most exposure to and sensitivity to heat. And then taking all of these things and creating meaningful engagement and education. I'll use my project as an example because it's the one I'm most familiar with. But there are there's a discussion here around kind of familiar versus unfamiliar climate impacts. So heat is a familiar part of every summer. But what is unfamiliar about it for folks is how much hotter it's going to get in the future, how that's going to look in their neighborhoods, and what that's going to do on a public health level. So learning to communicate that and using data to help make those points in a culturally relevant and informative fashion is also a very, very deep part of our work, but it can also be very challenging. So that about wraps it up for me. Thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Ariel.
Absolutely.
All right. And now we have Grace from Eagle Rock Analytics, who is going to share a little bit more about CalAdapt and also the work that she does. So Grace is a postdoctoral researcher at Eagle Rock Analytics, where she leads user training efforts and develops climate data use guidance for the CalAdapt analytics engine. Prior to joining Eagle Rock Analytics, she earned a PhD from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where she studied the interaction of climate and land use change impacts on biodiversity. And if you have any questions for Grace throughout her presentation, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I will pass it to Grace. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm happy to present this presentation on behalf of a much larger team than just myself. My colleagues at Eagle Rock Analytics and our collaborators at UC Berkeley and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and other organizations are working on these projects together, CalAdapt and the CalAdapt Analytics Engine, to provide actionable data and tools for decision-making in California, and we're funded by the California Energy Commission for this work. Next slide, please. So I'll begin by introducing our sort of problem statements for the two projects. For CalAdapt, the issue that we were trying to address with this project is that data portraying climate change in California is difficult for people to access and take action upon because it's sort of in lots of different locations and requires some analysis to get it into a usable piece of information. And so CalAdapt offers free public access to data and tools that support folks who want to explore climate change impacts across the state in terms of different aspects of climate change impacts, and then those impacts on infrastructure, communities, and natural resources. Next slide, please. And then the CalAdapt Analytics Engine was funded in order to address the problem that California has invested a lot of money across the state in producing really high quality, fine scale climate projections data, but that data needs a lot of processing power and know-how to get it into something usable for different folks across the state who want to use it in their decision-making processes. And so the Analytics Engine is a tool that provides cloud-based compute resources and then guidance and analytical tools to transform what's now become petabytes of data that the state has funded into accessible data products that can be used to take action. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to introduce a little bit about these two projects and how they've been used by people in the state. So caladapt.org, this is what the website looks like if you navigated to that website today. And what we have available at CalAdapt is data from California's climate change assessments and various interactive tools and visualizations to transform that data into information that's useful for planning. So we have this tool called the Local Climate Change Snapshot, which is a great place to start for your city or for your county to understand risks from climate change. And then we have among other tools, you can explore sea level rise, extreme weather. We have lots of different aspects of ways to measure climate change impacts. Next slide, please. And so our mission for these projects is to make data accessible and actionable for a broad audience so that you don't need to be a climate scientist or an expert in how the data are produced in order to get the best data to inform the decisions you need to make in local government and in the energy sector in particular, since our funding agency is the Energy Commission. Next slide, please. And CalAdapt, the caladapt.org, what served as the foundational data and analytical tools for California's fourth climate change assessment. And so these data and tools are approved by the state and used across a lot of different dimensions of how climate change is being assessed in California. Next slide, please. And then I'm going to present just a brief example of one place that CalAdapt data has been used to inform adaptation planning. Next slide. And so it's CalAdapt has been recognized as a key resource across lots of different agencies. So CalAdapt informs the adaptation planning guide for the state. CalAdapt data is used by the California Public Utilities Commission in their planning processes. And then it's an important state resource across different sectors and fields. Next slide, please. And it's also, CalAdapt has informed a lot of really cool regional planning work. And so This is just a spotlight on one example among many, organized by the Sierra Climate Adaptation and Mitigation Partnership to assess climate vulnerability in the Sierra region. And so they assessed climate vulnerability across lots of different dimensions, and CalAdapt provides information across multiple different dimensions of climate change impacts, things like temperature increases, changes in precipitation and flooding, and especially wildfire, which is really important in California. And here's an example of some of the outputs that they produced in their climate assessment. And so, there you can produce CalAdapt supports the production of these sort of summary pieces of information about changes in warm nights and summarizing temperature changes. And then you can also get really detailed gridded information if you want to produce visualizations for an area that you're focused on. And we're excited that CalAdapt is evolving for the future. So next slide, please. CalAdapt supported the 4th climate change assessment, and all this data is still available today, the CMIP-5 generation of data. This is all observations at 6 kilometer spatial resolution. And as I mentioned, we have a lot of these web-based interactive tools where you can understand that data. In support of the 5th climate change assessment, the state funded a huge increase in the temporal and spatial resolution of observations available. So now we have climate projections data at an hourly temporal resolution and at a 3 kilometer spatial resolution. And this data is orders of magnitude larger than the previous generation of climate observations. So the analytics engine is addressing that need by providing data and a platform that's optimized for doing this big data computational analysis with support of Amazon Web Services. Next slide, please. And so the Energy Commission has funded a broad suite of data and access projects that are part of the CalAdapt enterprise. So they funded this production of these projections data, productions of historical climate observation, historical climate data products, historical weather observations, and then the analytics engine and CalAdapt to help people access that data and transform it into usable information. Next slide. And then this is looks like some of my slide stuff didn't transfer completely, but this is just showing how these different pieces of the CalAdapt enterprise come together. So we have historical weather, historical climate modeling products, and projected climate modeling products that feed into our database, which is a huge amount of storage, 2.5 petabytes. And then our data catalog is used to support the tools and visualizations at CalAdapt and also at the analytics engine. And so for a general user, you might visit the CalAdapt website to get some quick visualizations. And for a user who has a specific analysis in mind, they might interact with the analytics engine where you can run our code or write your own code to analyze this data and produce metrics or visualizations of interest. Next slide. And now I'm going to give a little bit of information about what we're developing currently. So one project that we're working on is updating the CalAdapt website, which currently has the 4th assessment data to the 5th assessment. So this is updating with the CMIP-6 generation of data that's hourly and 3 kilometer resolution. So our development team's working really hard on that challenge. And so the CalAdapt analytics engine and CalAdapt.org will both be based on the same foundational 5th assessment climate data for California. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to zoom in a little bit on the analytics engine and talk about some of the tools and analytics that we have available there. Next slide, please. So the analytics engine, as opposed to CalAdapt.org, which is sort of a browser-based interactive website, the analytics engine comprises this foundational climate data funded as part of the 5th assessment. It includes AWS cloud computing resources to work with a very large amount of data. And then we are producing notebooks and code that guide users to use that data appropriately and do the sort of operations to subset the data to what they're interested in or calculate metrics of interest for planning processes. Next slide, please. And so in terms of thinking about using CalAdapt versus the analytics engine, the CalAdapt website is great if you want sort of at a glance, view some interactive maps and tools. We have daily resolution and 6-kilometer spatial resolution. And then the analytics engine is a really great resource if you're interested in doing detailed data analysis. If you have a specific question in mind that you want to answer and conduct your own analysis. And this is built off of the CMIP6 generation of data and at very fine spatial and temporal resolution. So for some planning applications, hourly data is very important. So that's where you can go to find that. And then I'll talk a little bit about our engagement process as we've been developing the analytics engine. We are using a co-production approach. And so we have been, since the project began, engaging with our different users and stakeholders and collaborators to understand how they use climate data and how we can produce a platform that meets their needs. And so this has been, we have a really great team at LBNL that is leading the engagement with all of our different stakeholders in the state, within state agencies, within utility companies, and across lots of different organizations to understand what people's needs are, what are the questions they have about how to apply climate data, and making sure that the tools that we're developing meet those needs and address those questions. Next slide, please. From that stakeholder engagement, we've identified some initial priorities for how people want to use climate data. One dimension is sort of threshold-based tools to understand extreme weather risks to vulnerable assets, areas, and communities. So understanding how, for example, maybe it's important for an asset that you have to understand how many days above 100 degrees would occur now versus at the end of century. Another priority is hourly time series of future conditions, which are input into different impactor management models. Folks are always also interested in distributions of extreme events. So understanding the timing and location of, a 1 in 20 year heat wave or a 1 in 100 year flood event. And that has different applications in health impacts, agricultural yields, and lots of different sectors. And then we also hope to eventually address important questions about wildfire planning and to inform long-range prevention and management, and then supporting the state's goals for zero carbon energy, and thinking about how climate change will impact solar and wind generation. And then through this, we've also identified some sort of what we call cross-cutting issues, where all of the different use cases that people have may touch some aspect of this. For one case is understanding uncertainty in climate models and what that means, and how that can be, how that can inform your analyses in order to think about, uncertainty across individual models and mission scenarios, et cetera. And then people are also interested in understanding what's the credibility of climate data and how do I pick the best data to answer my specific question. And so our goal is to produce some guidance and tools that help address both of these issues that sort of apply across different uses of climate data. And so next I'm going to talk about some specific tools that we have in the analytics engine. And so the analytics engine is a place where you can encounter state-sanctioned climate data for California, and I'll show some maps in a little bit. We have data for other states as well, although of course we're focused on California. And then you can access rigorous analytical tools that are designed by climate scientists and are based on sort of the best available science and techniques. And then our goal is to help people, to meet people where they are and help them build their capacity to intake climate data and use that to make decisions. And then thanks to our partners, we are able to offer some computational resources depending on which sector you're in to assess climate risk and inform planning. And so we have these foundational climate data products, including the downscaled climate projections, historical climate, and then this historical weather observations. And then we will also provide some derived data products that were these foundational products inform, some wildfire projections, estimates of renewable energy potential, solar, wind, and hydro generation capacity, and hydrological modeling. And so this is showing the spatial extent of the data. So we have data at different spatial resolutions for different areas of the Western United States. So the finest spatial resolution, that 3-kilometer data, is available primarily just over California and Wyoming, and a little chunk of Nevada is in that box. But the 9-kilometer data that we have, which is that hourly resolution, is available for much of the Western US. So if you're not in California, you could still access some of this data. Our AWS storage is publicly available. And then we have 45-kilometer data sort of all the way up east to the Mississippi. So there's lots of resources available that you can take advantage of, even if you don't live in California. And then we also have climate projections from this alternative downscaling method, which is just at daily scale, not hourly, which is called LOCA2. And these observations are just at over California primarily. A tiny chunk of Nevada is in this area too, I believe. But these observations are for, this data set has a lot of different climate models and is useful if you're interested in really understanding uncertainty across climate models and how that impacts regional responses. Next slide, please. So we have some guidance on our website about these two different types of data and how they can be used. They differ in their bias correction method, which impacts how you would use it. I'm happy to answer questions about this if people want to dig into it, but otherwise I think we can get to the next slide. And then just, this is just showing sort of the development of the climate change assessment process in the state, which started back in the 80s and occurs every few years. And with this upcoming 5th assessment, we're sort of increasing by order of magnitude how much climate data is available to understand risks from climate change in the state. And our goal with the analytics engine is to help provide tools to assess which model output is right for your particular application, since there's tons and tons of data now. And so it can be difficult to understand what's the best subset of that to address your question. And so in the analytics engine, to help people with that problem, we have, of course, our data catalog with all of these projections data. We have functions for doing some climate analysis. And then we have some notebooks which embed that analysis with guidance so you can understand what you're looking at and how to make informed decisions. Next slide. This is an example of what our data catalog looks like. It has lots of information about the emission scenario, the different variables that we have available in the spatial resolution. Next slide, please. We also have some tools which can produce visualizations to understand, for example, this is showing sort of a visualization of hourly temperature across a year in Los Angeles County. And then on the right is the change at 2 degrees of warming. And so you can see, for example, there's the most warming in the fall and winter in LA County. And then we have different tools for understanding climate uncertainty, exploring extreme events, and also we support this a warming levels framework. So if you want to think about the California when the world has reached 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees of warming, which is a really common framework for the international policy conversation. And then one thing I'll highlight that we have coming soon is a tool to evaluate different model skill and select the right model for your study needs, depending on the variable you're interested in or the geographic area. Next slide. And then just a brief preview of sort of what's coming next. As I mentioned, we have that model selection tool that we're working hard on. Also, typical meteorological years, which describe annual sort of typical mean conditions in hourly annual data, which are used in lots of different types of planning models. And then we're also working on wildfire indices to understand wildfire risk in the future. Next slide. And thank you so much for inviting me to speak and for your attention. I'm happy to answer your questions later on. And you can also visit either of our websites or email us if you're interested in learning more about any of the tools or data or the platforms that we have. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Grace and Ariel, both for sharing so much information. That was really great. Um, and so if you do have any questions, I want to encourage everyone to please share them in the chat. We are right at 10 before the hour, and I know that we wanted to take a break. And then when we come back, we're going to hear from the case studies. And then we're also just going to engage in a larger Q&A. So again, I'm seeing questions in the chat as well. So I am going to put this up. We are going to go on a 10-minute break. So we will come back together at right at 2 or 11 if you are where I am. And then we will all join back together to hear from those case study speakers. So definitely feel free to turn off your camera. If you can help it, try not to leave the call just so that we're ready to join in right at the top of the hour. So I will call everyone back in about 10 minutes. And while you are away, don't forget to put your questions in the chat. Thank you again to Ariel and Grace. All right, we are right at the top of the hour. So if you are here, you can go ahead and turn your camera back on or just send an emoji or maybe a reaction to let us know you're back. Awesome. I'm seeing people. I have too many windows open, so I'm only seeing a couple people. But that's on me, and that is okay. Well, thanks everybody for coming back. We are excited to step in and go into a different direction and hear from some folks that are really using climate services and data. So we are joined by two folks from the Western Regional Climate Center. And I am going to pass it to Ariel just to introduce our speakers. And then afterwards, we're going to have the opportunity to ask them questions, as well as Grace and Ariel. You'll have the opportunity to ask them questions as well. So put any questions you have in the chat. I will pass it to Ariel.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm going to introduce Adam Landis, who is going to walk us through some of the tools that are available through the Western Regional Climate Center, which is housed at DRI, of which CNAP is also a part. So Adam, thank you so much for joining us. I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ariel. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Adam Landis, and I am with the Western Regional Climate Center in Reno, Nevada at DRI. And I'm going to discuss some of the web applications that we provide. We have many web applications that we provide. Today, I'm just going to discuss a couple of them. I'm going to go over the Station Viewer and the Westwide Drought Tracker. Next slide, please. So the Station Viewer application is a tool that provides access to station metadata and climate data for a variety of networks and a variety of states, territories, and federal districts. It provides users with the ability to visualize climate variable fitness, as well as build tables and interactive charts from climate data, from station data. And that includes period of record climate summaries, 30-year monthly normals, and more. Soon we plan on providing access to RAWS station metadata and climate data, as well as sub-daily data products, and the ability to download a CSV file of multi-station metadata for a given state. And the station viewer is accessible at that link there, wrcc.dri.edu/my/stations. And another tool that we offer is the West-wide Drought Tracker. This tool provides access to fine-scale drought monitoring and climate products. And some of the products that users can build are grid and contour maps of drought indices and climate data. Some of the drought indices we offer are PDSI, SCPDSI, Palmer Z-Index, SPI, and SPEI, as well as climate data for precipitation and temperature departures and anomalies. And soon we plan to offer support for building time series of grid points, counties, states, and regions, as well as being able to bulk download data for further analysis. And the West-wide Drought Tracker is accessible at that link there. All right, and now I'm going to go into a demo of some of these tools. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and go to our website. So that's wrcc.dri.edu/my. And yeah, so when you go here, in order to access any of the data products, you will need to register for an account. It's completely free. Just you come over here to the register form, fill this out, and submit. I already have an account, so I'm going to log in. All right. And I'm going to start by showing the station viewer. So that's up here under this stations link. And you'll see that the first thing that pulls up is a map of stations. The default network is co-op. So these are all co-op stations you're seeing here. And you can zoom in and you can click on any of these stations. I'm going to choose Reno Airport. And you'll see it pulls up all the metadata for that station and allows you to add to your dashboard group or explore products directly from there. I'm going to go ahead and add this to my group. And let's say I have the name of a station, but I don't know exactly where it's located. I can also do a text search over here. And let's say I want to do Virginia City. And you'll notice it will pull up, sometimes there will be stations with the same name, but in completely different states. So there's this gear icon over here you can click, which will allow you to center the map on that item. So I can click that and it'll pull it up on the map over here. And this is the one I'm after. So I'll go ahead and add that to my group. And let's say I'm interested in a CoCoRaHS station. I can come over here and choose a different network. And then it will load the map with those stations. So I'll just zoom out here and let's say I want to choose this one. Just go ahead and add that. And now I'm satisfied with my set of stations. I'm going to go ahead and click on the dashboard tab up here to take a look. You'll see on the left here, the current location is the first one I selected. And the dashboard here provides a nice at-a-glance monthly climate summary for all of the climate variables offered by the station, as well as at the bottom here, there are a listing of the percent of possible observations for each element. So you can see the station has pretty complete data. And if I wanted to change the location, I can click over on the left there and choose one of these other ones here. So I'll choose Virginia City, save and close, and you can see the dashboard populates with all of that information. And if I want to build any other sort of products, I can click this new chart/table button here. And we have a bunch of different products that you can build. I'm going to show the period record, daily averages and extremes. This is a line chart. And I'm going to choose temperature, and I'm going to do a 29-day moving window for my averages. And then I'm going to click view product down here. And there we go. From here, I can download, save as PNG, for example. I can also save as SVG. And then I can also interact with the chart too. So you'll see that as I hover over it, it will highlight the point at that particular spot on the x-axis. So let's say I'm interested in this point here. And that tells me the averages and extremes for that date, April 11th. Yeah, so that's Station Viewer. There's a lot more products I can demo, but for the sake of brevity, I'm going to move on to the Westway Drought Tracker now. So I'll go back to the main page, and Westway Drought Tracker is under Climate Apps, and click on Westway Drought Tracker. And you'll see this one just starts out by loading a dashboard of several grid maps for 1 month timescales for climate data and drought indices. If I'm interested in another region, I can select Update Boundary up here and choose, say, I want to look at the Western US. You'll see all these update for that boundary, and then for each of these sections, I can look at a different time scale. So maybe I'm interested in a 6-month time scale. You can change that, or maybe a 3-month here. These maps are also interactive. So if I am interested in what this section, what the percent of average is for this section, I can click anywhere in here, and it'll tell me what the actual value is at that grid point. So you can compare with the color bar over here and see that this is well over the highest tick mark we have here. So anything over 300 is binned into this color here, and we can see this is a 411% departure from average. So quite wet. And for this application, there are a couple other products we offer. In addition to the grid maps, we also offer a contour map. So if I wanted to see those those values binned as contours, I can choose that. We'll do Pacific Northwest, and let's say we want to look at the Palmer Z index, and maybe I want to look at some archived data. I can do 2022, let's say February. We also offer, in addition to the Mercator projection, we offer an Alberts projection. Also, I'll choose that. All right, and there it is. Like the other charts, you can also save this as PNG or SVG. You can also download the raw GeoTIFF data and NetCDF data underlying this chart. And the chart is also interactive, so I can choose any of these contours here and look at the specific contour interval for that contour. All right. How am I doing on time? Do I have any more time to, or?
You have about a minute. I want to make sure that folks have time to ask you questions as well.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's pretty much. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam, for sharing all that. And I put some of the links to that in the chat as well, which can be shared out afterwards. So we have been having some questions come in Um, and if you have any more questions for Adam or Grace or Ariel, you can continue putting them in the chat. But we have our first question from Robin, and this is for Grace. And Robin asked, are you aware of this data being used to inform forest health or restoration projects?
I am not personally aware of any applications like that, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. Yeah, I would suggest checking out the California climate assessment resources, because I know they fund lots of different work across lots of different applications, lots of different conceptions of climate change impacts.
Awesome, thank you. And another question from Alice for Grace is, how can we get a demo of the analytics engine? I'm interested in seeing the mapping layers with K through 12 schools shown in any school district in order to visualize and analyze the impacts and vulnerabilities.
So right now the analytics engine is in sort of our beta phase. And so we are providing access on a case-by-case basis. So there is an email address in the last slide of my presentation, which I can drop in the chat after the Q&A, where you can send an email if you are interested in learning more, and we can, on a case-by-case basis, we review whether we can give people access. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. If you could put that link in the chat, that would be great. And then a question for Adam from Rachel. Are there plans to include non-continental US states and territories in these tools, sorry?
With the station viewer, we actually do provide access to stations in Alaska, Hawaii, all of the US territories, and DC. So you just need to change the network. So for co-op, we only offer the Western United States. For any other network, though, we offer all 50 states and territories and federal districts. The Westwide Drought Tracker, on the other hand, the focus on that is the Western US. We do have CONUS, which spans all of continental US, but yeah, I don't know that there's going to be any plans to expand that, just because it's kind of focused on just the Western region. So yeah, hope that answers your questions.
Great. Another question from Alice is, CalAdapt or the engine interoperable with other tools that are GIS based, such as Healthy Places Indexed or Cal in Enviroscreen, or even the EPA EJ screen? And this is for Grace, I believe.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one we get pretty frequently. I think I are definitely planning to integrate with the Cal Enviroscreen data for CalAdapt, and that's something that the other resources I'm not too sure about, but I know for sure Cal Enviroscreen is a planned thing for the next generation of the caladapt.org website to be integrated with.
Awesome. And one from Rachel. Have there been studies done to show if and how housing prices have changed if they reside in areas identified to be at risk in CalAdapt, similar to Bernstein 2019 or Tyndale 2020? Yeah.
That's a really interesting question. Another one, I'm not personally aware of studies like that, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. But yeah, that's an interesting application of the data.
Awesome, yeah. And this is from Hannah for Grace. Are all LOCA grids the same size they have been too large to be perceived as accurate in our area. Can/will they get smaller to allow more precision and downscaling?
Yeah, so in the fifth assessment data, the LOCA observations are at 3 kilometer by 3 kilometer grid cells, which is still fairly coarse if you're interested in like neighborhood level effects. One thing that we are supporting in the analytics engine, a tool that we're developing, is localizing the projections at these big grid cells to an individual weather station so that you can look at sort of the weather station's observations in the historical period and then projected, for example, temperature into the future, which might be more applicable if you're interested in like a highly local analysis, is finding a weather station in a nearby area and doing that and using our tool that does that localization process. Yeah, I think that's the most relevant tool we have for that specific question.
Awesome, thank you. And Ariel, I see you put a question. I want to give you a chance. Maybe if you want to ask that, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking about something asked about the housing prices, and it made me think about insurers and the market in California, and kind of wondering if they're leveraging CalAdapt or data like this to decide what policies to issue and where. So I don't know if that's anything you've heard about, Grace.
I haven't heard about anything specific any more than, you know, the news articles about some insurers pulling out of the state because of wildfire risk. But yeah, I'm not aware of anything in particular, but that's also a really interesting idea about applications for the data.
Awesome, thank you. And one more question we have, and again, if folks have questions or are thinking of things as we are discussing these, please put any questions you have in the chat or feel free to raise your hand. But this is from Alice again. Is there any fluid dynamics modeling for scenarios of wildfire, smoke spread, or exposure under predictive wind data? And this is for Grace, but also anyone who maybe can speak to this, definitely feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear if anyone else on the call has knowledge about this. In terms of the CalAdapt data, we don't have anything like this. We do have the wildfire projections data that we have is from another project funded by the same state agency, the Energy Commission, called PyRegence. So you might investigate there. I just put the link in the chat. But yeah, I mean, if there's other folks on the call who know about this and want to speak about it, I'm super interested to learn as well.
Yeah, and if folks do have anything, definitely feel free to jump in. I see Roderick, raise your hand. And then Robin, we can have you afterwards as well.
Yeah, just real quick, great presentations, awesome data work. I work in the flood mitigation industry sector that retrofits buildings and gets them so they don't flood. One of the things we're seeing really primary importance, especially as we've just mentioned, the hardening of the fire insurance. We're seeing a similar hardening in the property casualty wind insurance markets. And of course, all the old buildings flood insurance is now going to actual risk rating. There's a lot of concern out there in the municipal bonding arena, which is our massive financing vehicle for infrastructure and things, is that the values are really going to be impacted by these extreme insurance rates. And so we really need to be able to overlay the vulnerability data onto the assets and then get a summary. Now that all the assets are pretty much digitized GIS wise, we should be able to just theoretically, I'm not in that world, you all are, but be able to just circle a group of structures in a flood zone and say, these assets have this value, the revenues coming off of these assets are this, and what if we do a 40% devaluation, like they're saying in 20 years, or what if we retrofit and we stabilize those values? Will that then help us convince the insurance industry with retrofit, for fire and for wind, that they should lower their rates because we have a much more resilient, less prone to making claims? Or as the insurance companies have told us, can you just stop the bleeding and the claims right now? So those are some things that we're seeing out here. We would love to be able to overlay that and get those kinds of data coming out, since that funds everything, the taxes and stuff. So thanks.
Thank you, Roderick. Robin?
Yeah, I just was thinking about Ariel's description of her programs, especially the community outreach to the so-called frontline communities to co-create these climate solutions. And I'm curious about your thoughts on how the workforce development intersects with that community outreach, because I know, I mean, I would suspect that the community might be more engaged if they also felt like they could get jobs out of this growing field. So I don't know if you've have anything to say to that.
So the project that CNAP has in the San Joaquin Valley is focused on workforce development and using climate data to educate the folks who are going to be agricultural producers in that region. So they're attending agricultural programs at the community colleges in the area. And they are using climate data and climate education to as kind of a selling point, basically. Like once you know these things, you're more competitive in the job market, and you are prepared for an increasingly uncertain future. So there's a workforce development connection there. Here in Vegas, the workforce connection actually tends to be more so around outdoor workers who are exposed to heat in a very different fashion from folks who work outside. And it's not necessarily that working on this climate impact here and using our community engagement necessarily is going to immediately create new jobs, but what we can do is recognize the vulnerabilities that exist within our current workforce, or just changes around how folks are being exposed to extreme heat through their jobs. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Awesome, thank you. I'm just looking to make sure we answered all the questions. I saw that Ariel had one for Adam about, does the station viewer connect the location to future climate projections? Not currently, but this is something we're interested in providing. That's great. I just want to leave it open for another minute if anybody has any questions before we go to our next activity.
I posted one in the chat that was sort of answered, but I have a follow-up to it for the CalAdapt folks. You mentioned that the typical meteorological year is an output that you're looking to create in the future, which is very exciting because when we've talked to CalAdapt in past years, it sounded like that wasn't on the docket. I'm curious, are you working with any collaborators on the methodology to create those forward-looking files? And if so, who are you collaborating with, since there are many entities that have been exploring this, including in Minnesota? So maybe we want to connect if we haven't yet.
Yeah, so we are working on producing those TMY files for projected data. I think that should be the sort of first iteration should be available pretty soon. We've been following sort of there's an established federal methodology, and we have talked to some folks with the University of Minnesota. So maybe we're thinking of the same people as we've been designing or sort of co-producing what the TMY tool will look like. But yeah, we're totally interested in, if you have people you think would be useful to connect with, I'd love to hear that, so we can make sure that we're talking to all the right people who would want to use that output and want to inform what it looks like.
Awesome. Thank you. I see Justin put some resources in the chat. That's great. Another huge thank you to Grace and Adam, especially for giving that live demo, and Ariel. I'll clap in person because you can hear me, but I'm sure that everybody is sending virtual claps as well. I'm going to share my screen again as we transition to our next activity, which is really giving you all, I think I just shared. There we go. That is the correct one. This is going to give you a chance to connect and reflect and kind of expand on all that we've gone over today, and really give you a chance to talk it out, think it through, and see how this would relate to your own work. So I believe that Mia is putting the Jamboard in the chat, but we are going to again go into smaller groups for about 20 minutes, and you're going to be using the Jamboard really just to collect your ideas and thoughts so you don't forget them. But this conversation will happen in your small groups, and you're going to reflect on today's presentation, really looking at the three questions that you see on the Jamboard. So which data service, modeling, or technical tools do you currently use, or do you see enhancing the work that you or your company does? What specific information or input do or would you need from your clients to inform or customize the use of climate data and information in your products and services? And then also, how will this data best support frontline communities? So those are the questions that you're going to be going over. And so I will turn it to Megan to make sure the breakout rooms are set up, and then we'll all come back together, share out really what you all were talked about, and then wrap up today's session. Welcome back, everyone. I believe we have all the rooms back, so I just wanted to open it up. If anybody would like to share reflections or insights or observations, definitely I want to open the floor. You can put them in the chat or in the Slack, or just feel free to unmute. But if anybody would like to share an insight, I will make that space. All right. I will move us to our next slide. Again, you can share in the Slack, which I believe the link for that will be coming in. Yes, there was a ton of things on the Jamboard, so great that your conversations went well. Just some reminders for the Academy. I definitely encourage you all to sign up for those one-on-one consultations if you would like. There are some that are filled up, so if you don't see the person you would like to meet with, you can definitely reach out to me and I can see maybe they will have availability. I just want to make sure everybody has that opportunity. Again, connect on Slack. That is where I send reminders for the sessions, as well as opportunities to interact more and engage with your peers in Academy. Academy participants outside of the sessions. And then I also wanted to share our next session. It won't be Tuesday, it will be next Thursday, November 9th, again from 1 p.m. ET to 3 p.m. ET. You do not have to sign up for the one-on-one consultations in Slack. Slack is optional. It is just a good resource to have. You can just sign up for those consultations through the links. So we have our Caribbean regional session next Thursday, November 9th at 1 p.m. ET. They have quite a few really special case study speakers in that region, even if you aren't from there, maybe you don't know as if the information would be super relevant to you. I think it's going to be a really interesting session either way. So I encourage anybody who would like to join. But yeah, I believe that is the last slide we have. Again, any questions, you can reach out to me or Mia. And thank you. Yeah, I can definitely email out that Jamboard. Thank you again to Adam and to Ariel and to Grace for being our speakers today.